My name is Derek Callahan, and my family has been trapped on our Iowa farm for 11 days. Every time we try to leave, we end up back at our driveway. Our phones are dead. No one comes anymore. And every night at 9:47 p.m., something walks through our cornfield. Something impossibly tall that knows our names. Last night, it stood outside my daughter's window, whispering things only my dead brother would know. This morning we found symbols carved into our barn that weren't there yesterday. If you're watching this, don't come looking for us. Just know that some places hold on to you, and they never let go. Stay with me, because what happened next will haunt you forever. The farmhouse looked smaller than Derek remembered. He stood in the gravel driveway, hands on his hips, staring at the peeling white paint and sagging porch of the house where he'd grown up. 20 years. 20 years since he'd last stood on this property, and it felt like the land itself was watching him return. Claire touched his shoulder gently. "We don't have to stay long. Just get what we need and list it with a realtor." Derek nodded, but didn't move. Behind the house, the cornfield stretched in every direction. 200 acres of tall, unharvested stalks swaying in the breeze. It looked wrong, overgrown, wild. Addison climbed out of the car, earbuds in, barely glancing at her surroundings. 13 years old and thoroughly unimpressed with rural Iowa. The house was worse inside. Uncle Walter had lived alone here for decades, and it showed. Stacks of newspapers, dust thick enough to leave footprints. And strange things Derek couldn't explain. Maps tacked to the walls with routes drawn in red marker. Routes that looped back on themselves, crossed out again and again. Doors with locks on the outside, as if to keep someone in rather than keep someone out. Claire found the journals first, dozens of them stacked in the kitchen. She flipped through one, frowning. "Derek, look at this." Every page was filled with the same phrases, written over and over in Walter's shaky handwriting. "Stay inside after dark. Don't answer when it calls. Never go into the corn at night. It won't let me leave." "Dementia," Derek said quickly. Too quickly. He was old, paranoid. But Claire's expression said she wasn't convinced. In the upstairs bedroom, Derek found a box of old photographs. He sifted through them slowly. And his chest tightened when he saw one of Ethan, his little brother, frozen at 12 years old, grinning at the camera in front of the barn. But something was wrong with the photo. Behind Ethan, barely visible in the cornfield, someone had drawn a figure in black ink. Tall, too tall, impossibly thin. Derek shoved the photo back in the box. That night, they made beds on the dusty furniture and tried to settle in. Derek told himself they'd be gone in 3 days. Clean out the house, meet with the realtor, never come back. Around 9 p.m., Addison went to her room. Claire read on the couch. Derek stood at the kitchen window, staring out at the cornfield, now lost in darkness. And then he heard it. Footsteps in the corn, slow, deliberate, circling the house. He pressed his face to the glass, trying to see, but the corn was too thick, the night too dark. Claire appeared beside him. "Do you hear that?" He nodded. The footsteps stopped, and then, at exactly 9:47 p.m., they heard it. 3 voices calling from the cornfield. Familiar voices, impossible voices. "Derek," one called. It sounded like his mother, dead for 15 years. "Claire," another whispered. It sounded like her sister, who lived in California. "Addison," the third voice sang softly. It sounded like Ethan. Derek's blood went cold. Addison came running down the stairs. "Did you hear that? Someone just said my name." All three of them stood frozen, staring out at the dark cornfield. And somewhere in that endless field, something was waiting for them to answer. Morning light made everything feel less threatening. Derek stood at the kitchen window with his coffee, watching the cornfield sway in the breeze. Just corn, just an old farm. The voices from last night felt like a dream now, something his exhausted mind had conjured. But Claire wasn't buying it. "We're leaving," she said, already packing their bags. "Right now. I don't care about the realtor or the house or any of it. Claire, Derek, we all heard it, all three of us. That wasn't coyotes or wind or imagination." Her hands shook as she zipped Addison's suitcase. "We're going home." He wanted to argue, wanted to say they were being irrational, but the fear in her eyes stopped him. They loaded the car in silence. Addison sat in the back, pale and quiet, none of her usual teenage attitude. The gravel crunched under their tires as Derek pulled out of the driveway and headed down the long dirt road toward the highway. The road was straight, perfectly straight. Derek had driven it 1,000 times as a kid. 20 minutes later, they pulled into their own driveway. Claire's head snapped up. "What? How?" "I didn't turn," Derek said, gripping the steering wheel. "I didn't turn anywhere. The road doesn't turn." They tried again. This time, Derek had Claire mark trees with chalk as they passed. They drove for 30 minutes, following the same straight road, passing the same chalk-marked trees over and over until they ended up right back where they started. "This isn't possible," Claire whispered. Derek got out of the car. "I'll walk it. Maybe something with the car." He walked. For 2 hours, he walked in a straight line away from the farm, keeping the sun on his left to maintain direction. The cornfield stretched endlessly on both sides. No turns, no curves. He ended up on his own front porch. Claire was waiting there, tears streaming down her face. "The phone has no signal. The GPS just says unknown. Derek, we're trapped." Addison called from around the side of the house. "Mom, Dad, you need to see this." In the dirt near the foundation were footprints, fresh, massive, barefoot, but they had too many toes. That night, they locked every door and window, pushed furniture against the entrances. Derek found a baseball bat in the garage and kept it close. At 9:46 p.m., they sat in the living room, watching the clock. At exactly 9:47, the knocking started. Not just one door, every window. All at once, rhythmic, purposeful, like something was testing every possible entrance simultaneously. Addison grabbed Claire's hand. "Make it stop." But it didn't stop. It went on for 5 minutes, 10, 15, and then, as suddenly as it started, silence. Derek moved to the window, carefully pulled back the curtain. At the edge of the cornfield, barely visible in the moonlight, stood a figure. Impossibly tall, impossibly thin, its proportions all wrong. It didn't move, didn't breathe, just stood there, watching the house. Derek didn't sleep that night. Instead, he spread Uncle Walter's journals across the kitchen table, reading by lamplight while Claire and Addison tried to rest upstairs. There had to be answers, had to be some explanation for what was keeping them here. The journals went back 30 years, page after page of Uncle Walter's handwriting, growing shakier as the years passed, and scattered throughout. Repeated like prayers were rules. Never go into the corn after dark. Never acknowledge it when it calls your name. Keep the doors locked at 9:47 p.m. Never look directly at it. Derek's hands trembled as he read one entry from 1995. It's been here longer than the farm, maybe longer than the land itself. It doesn't want us dead. It wants us to stay, to witness, to remember what it is. Without us, it fades, so it keeps us. In the living room, Claire had found something on her laptop before the internet died. Old newspaper articles about the farm, different families over the decades, the Morrisons in 1982, the Hendersons in 1967, the Kowalskis in 1951, all gone, all listed as missing or dead under suspicious circumstances. "Derek," Claire whispered, showing him the screen. "This place has been doing this for over a century." Addison came down the stairs, face pale. "There's something carved into the barn. I saw it from my window." They went outside together, staying close to the house. On the barn's weathered wood were symbols, circular patterns, spirals, marks that looked ancient. Derek had seen them before, in a book about Native American sites in Iowa. "These are old," Claire said. "Really old." A journal entry from 1982 made Derek's blood run cold. "It took the Morrison family, all 5 of them. I watched them walk into the corn at night, and they never came back. I heard them screaming for 3 days after, screaming for help, screaming to be let go. The sound finally stopped on the 3rd night." Derek closed the journal and looked toward the cornfield. And froze. There, maybe 30 yards into the corn, stood a boy, 12 years old, dark hair, red shirt, Ethan, his little brother, exactly as Derek remembered him the day he drowned. Same clothes, same face. Ethan raised his hand and waved, smiled, beckoned Derek to come closer. "Derek?" Claire grabbed his arm. "What are you looking at?" "You don't see him?" "See who?" Derek's heart hammered against his ribs. Ethan tilted his head, still smiling, still waving. "Come here, big brother. Come play." "It's not real," Derek whispered to himself. "It's not him." But God, it looked like him. Claire pulled him back toward the house. "Whatever you're seeing, don't go to it. That's probably the point." They spent the rest of the day inside, avoiding windows, avoiding the corn. Derek couldn't stop thinking about that wave, that smile, that night. At 9:47 p.m., they huddled together in the living room. The knocking came right on schedule, every door, every window. But this time, it was different. This time, something spoke. From right outside Addison's bedroom window on the 2nd floor, a voice whispered, not calling from the corn, right there, against the glass. "Let me in, little one." Addison's face went white. "Your uncle did," the voice continued, soft and patient. "He let me in. We were friends for a very long time. Don't you want a friend too?" Derek bolted up the stairs, but Addison was already at her window, hand on the curtain. "Don't look at it," he shouted, but she'd already pulled the curtain back. And whatever was standing on the other side of that 2nd-story window smiled at her, watching them. The voice started small, a whisper through the walls. Static on Uncle Walter's old radio that Derek couldn't turn off, no matter how many times he unplugged it. Words carried on the wind through the corn, spoken in voices that sounded almost human. Almost. "Derek," it said through the kitchen wall one morning. "I know what you did." He froze, coffee cup halfway to his lips. "You were supposed to watch him, your little brother. Your parents told you to watch him by the pond, but you didn't. You were angry. You went inside." The voice was soft, understanding, terrible. "And when you came back, Ethan was already gone." Derek's hands shook so badly he had to set the cup down. That afternoon, the voice found Claire in the living room. Through the radio static, through the walls, intimate and invasive. 3 years ago, the baby, you blamed yourself, you still do. You think Derek doesn't know how much you cry when he's asleep. Claire's face went pale. How? I can help, the voice whispered. I can take the pain away. I can give you what you lost. That night, they found Addison standing at her window, hand pressed against the glass. He says he understands, she said, without turning around. About the girls at school, about how they make me feel small. He says here, I matter. Here, I'm special. Derek pulled her away from the window. Don't listen to it. Why not? It's the only thing that's been nice to me in months. He wanted to argue, but the hurt in her eyes stopped him. Derek buried himself in Walter's journals, searching for weakness, for answers. He found entries about failed escape attempts, about fires that wouldn't spread. Tried to burn the cornfield today. 5th attempt. Doused it in gasoline. It wouldn't catch. When it finally did, the flames went out on their own after 10 minutes. The corn didn't even char. But one entry made Derek's blood run cold. I invited it in. 30 years ago, I was so lonely after Martha died. It came to me, promised me company, promised I'd never be alone again. I said yes. I didn't understand what I was agreeing to. Now I can't uninvite it. It owns this place. It owns me. And God help me, I think it's been waiting for Derek to come home. That night, they tied Addison's bedroom door shut after finding her sleepwalking toward the corn for the 3rd time. She'd been standing at the edge of the field in her pajamas, barefoot in the dirt, saying, He's calling me. He says I belong with him. Claire found the property deed in Walter's desk, names crossed out in faded ink, dating back to 1848, the Kowalski family, the Henderson family, the Morrison family, every family that had ever lived here, all gone, all claimed. The voice spoke again through the walls that night, but this time it was different, clearer, closer. Derek, I've been waiting for you to come home. You belong here. You always did. Your brother knows. He's been waiting too. Leave us alone, Derek shouted at the walls. I can bring him back. Ethan, he's still here. He never really left. Don't you want to see him again? To tell him you're sorry? Derek pressed his hands against his ears, but the voice came from inside his head now. Just say yes. That's all it takes. One little word. The next morning, Claire stumbled into the kitchen, face ashen. I went walking, just around the barn. I found... Her voice broke. Derek followed her outside. Behind the barn, hidden in the overgrown grass at the edge of the cornfield, were graves. 7 of them. Fresh dirt, recently dug, unmarked. And from somewhere deep in the corn, something laughed. Dawn broke cold and gray, and the entity was waiting. Derek saw it from the kitchen window, a shape at the edge of the cornfield that hurt to look at directly. It shifted, flickered, like something trying to hold a form it wasn't meant to have. Too tall, too thin, wrong in ways that made his eyes water. And then it spoke. Derek, Ethan's voice, come talk to me. Walter stayed for you. His uncle's voice now. Don't you understand? He gave himself so you could leave. We all made the choice. A woman's voice Derek didn't recognize. Then a man's. Then a child's. Dozens of voices overlapping. Speaking as one. Now it's your turn. Claire and Addison came to stand beside him, and together they watched the impossible thing at the edge of their property. One of you stays willingly, it said, The other two go free. That's the deal. That's always been the deal. Walter understood. He chose you, Derek. He chose to let you live your life. Now you choose. Derek's stomach turned. Uncle Walter. All those years alone on this farm. All those journal entries about not being able to leave. Walter had sacrificed himself. For him. No, Claire said firmly. We're all leaving, or none of us are. We're not playing this game. They tried everything over the next 2 days. Fire wouldn't catch in the corn. Not anymore. Derek doused the stalks in gasoline, and they wouldn't even smolder. Salt lines across the doorways meant nothing. The knocking came at 9:47 p.m. regardless. Claire found a Bible in Walter's room and read passages aloud. The entity laughed through the walls. You think I fear your gods? It asked. I was here before your gods. I'll be here after. Addison found the hidden room by accident. A door in the basement she'd never noticed before. Unlocked now when it had been sealed shut days earlier. Inside were belongings, clothes, toys, photographs, remnants of all the families who'd lived here before, and journals, so many journals. Claire found one from 1923, written by a woman named Sarah Henderson. It feeds on presence, she'd written in shaky script. On witness. It needs us to see it, to acknowledge it, to know it exists. My husband thinks if we can ignore it completely, it might fade. We're going to try. The entry ended abruptly. Derek looked at Claire. What if that's it? What if we just stop acknowledging it? You think we can just ignore it away? I think it's the only thing we haven't tried. For 3 days, they didn't respond, didn't look, didn't react. When the voices called their names, they stayed silent. When the knocking came at 9:47, they sat in the living room with their backs to the doors, reading books, pretending nothing was happening. When shadows moved past the windows, they didn't turn. It was excruciating. Every instinct screamed to look, to acknowledge, to respond, but they didn't. By the second day, the knocking grew louder, more insistent, the voices more desperate. By the third day, something changed. The corn began to move, not swaying in the wind, moving toward the house, stalks uprooting themselves, dragging through the dirt, closing in like something alive. Claire grabbed Derek's arm. It's angry. Don't look at it, he whispered. Don't acknowledge it. That night, they tied Addison's door shut as usual, checked all the locks, and tried to sleep. Derek woke at 3 a.m. to Claire shaking him. She's gone, Claire whispered, voice trembling. Derek, she's gone. They ran to Addison's room. The door was still tied shut. The window was still locked. But Addison was gone, and written in frost on the inside of her window were 2 words. She answered. The moment Derek heard Addison's voice from the cornfield, he knew it was a trap. Mom, Dad, help me! Her scream cut through the dawn air, desperate and terrified. Claire was already moving toward the door. Derek grabbed her arm. Wait. This is what it wants. I don't care. Tears streamed down her face. That's our daughter. They stood at the edge of the cornfield as the sun rose, knowing that stepping inside meant breaking Uncle Walter's most important rule. Never go into the corn. But Addison's voice called again, more distant now. Please, I'm scared. They went in together. The corn closed around them immediately, stalks pressing close, blocking out the light. Within 10 steps, the farmhouse disappeared behind them. The paths didn't make sense. They'd walk straight and end up back where they started. Turn left 3 times and somehow be going in a different direction entirely. Gravity felt wrong, like the ground tilted at angles it shouldn't. Derek's watch stopped working. When he looked at his phone, the time jumped randomly. 6:47 a.m., then 2:15 p.m., then 9:03 a.m. They found things in the dirt, a child's shoe from the 1950s, tattered clothing, drawings scratched into the earth, families holding hands, houses, the sun, and bones. Not many, just enough to know others had been here before. The entity appeared to them in pieces. Ethan stood at the end of one path, waving. When they got closer, he vanished. Walter sat on the ground in a clearing, reading one of his journals. He looked up, smiled sadly, and dissolved into smoke. Once, Derek saw himself, age 16, standing at the pond where Ethan had drowned, crying. "Is this real?" Claire whispered. "Is any of this real?" Then they heard it. Addison's voice, close now, just ahead. They pushed through the final row of corn and found a clearing. And there she was. 3 of her. 3 identical Addisons, all in the same pajamas, all with the same expression of relief and fear. Each one ran toward them, crying, "Mom! Dad! It's me! Don't listen to them! I'm real! Please, you have to know which one I am." Derek and Claire froze, paralyzed by impossible choice. "You have to choose," a voice said from behind them, Ethan's voice. "Take the wrong one home, and you invite me in willingly. Take the right one, and maybe I'll let you go." Derek studied each Addison carefully. Same height, same hair, same frightened eyes. Then Claire stepped forward, knelt down in front of the middle one. "Show me your knee," she said quietly. The girl pulled up her pajama leg. "There, a small scar from a bike accident 2 years ago." "That's her," Claire said. "That's our daughter." The other 2 Addisons smiled. Their smiles stretched too wide, teeth too many, and then they melted into the ground like water. Derek pulled the real Addison into his arms. She was shaking, crying into his shoulder. "We need to go," he said. "Now." They turned to run and froze. The entity stood at the edge of the clearing, not as Ethan, not as Walter, as itself, impossibly tall, impossibly thin, a shape that hurt to look at, that the eye couldn't quite hold. It had been there the whole time, watching, waiting, and it was smiling. "Did you really think," it said, in every voice at once, "that I'd make it that easy?" The entity didn't speak right away. It stood there in the clearing, that impossible shape flickering at the edges, and Derek felt something shift in the air. Not anger, something worse. Pity. "You've carried it for 20 years, it said softly, using Ethan's voice now. "The guilt. The belief that you failed him." Derek's chest tightened. Addison pressed closer to Claire. "You want to know what really happened that day at the pond?" "Don't listen to it," Claire whispered. But Derek couldn't look away. The entity moved closer, and the clearing changed. The corn faded. Suddenly they were standing beside the farm pond, watching a memory play out like a film. 12-year-old Ethan splashing in the water. 16-year-old Derek storming toward the house, angry about something trivial he couldn't even remember now. And Uncle Walter, standing at the water's edge, talking to something Derek couldn't see. "I offered him a deal," the entity said. "Let me take the boy. Let him stay with me, and I'd release you, your parents, everyone." He said yes. Derek's knees nearly gave out. "No. Walter loved you. He chose you. And Ethan didn't drown. He walked into the water because I called him, because your uncle had already made the trade." The memory dissolved. They were back in the corn. You couldn't have saved him, it continued. There was never anything you could do. Derek felt something crack open inside him. 20 years of guilt, bleeding out all at once. That's what I do, the entity said, almost gently. I feed on it, the grief, the love that turns to pain. Family bonds make the strongest anchors. You're a parasite, Claire said, voice shaking. I'm a witness. I can't create life, can't end it, can't force anyone to stay. I can only offer deals and wait for you to accept. Addison's voice cut through the clearing, small but clear. What happens if we don't make a deal? What if we just stay together and refuse? The entity went very still. Walter tried that, it said finally. 30 years, he stayed. He refused every offer, and he died here, old and alone, still trapped. Derek's mind raced. It needs permission. It needs us to choose. You can't actually keep us, he said slowly. Not forever. You need us to give in. The entity's form rippled, something like frustration crossing its impossible face. Eventually you all do. Loneliness breaks you. Desperation. Time. You'll choose, Derek, just like Walter did, just like everyone before you. Claire had gone very quiet. Derek turned and found her holding Walter's final journal, the one they'd brought from the house. Her hands trembled as she flipped to the last pages. Derek, she whispered, there's another entry from 1848. The first family. She looked up, eyes wide with something between terror and hope. It says how this thing was created and how it can be destroyed. Claire read the entry aloud, her voice breaking on every other word. The settler's name was Joseph Callahan, Derek's ancestor. A man who tried to protect his family with old magic he barely understood, binding something ancient to the land to keep his crops safe. But the spell twisted, became a cage, and what he trapped grew hungry. The binding can only be broken by blood, Claire read. A descendant of the caster must offer themselves willingly to the land, not to the entity, to break its prison. Derek understood immediately. His stomach dropped. No, Claire said, looking up at him. Absolutely not. It's the only way. Then we find another way. The entity had gone silent. Watching them, Derek could feel its attention like weight pressing down on his chest. There is no other way, he said quietly. This is why it wanted me back, why Walter kept me away for 20 years. He knew. Addison grabbed his hand. Dad, please. The ground beneath them began to shake. The entity had heard enough. The corn started moving again, stalks bending inward, reaching for them like fingers. The farmhouse in the distance groaned, boards splintering. It knows what we're planning, Claire shouted over the sound of breaking wood. Derek pulled the journal from her hands. The ritual was simple. Blood, words, intention. He could do this. When I start, he told Claire, looking into her eyes, you take Addison and you run. Don't look back. Don't stop. Derek, I can't. You're not losing me. He touched her face, memorizing it. You're getting our daughter back. That's all that matters. Tears streamed down Claire's cheeks. Addison was sobbing. The corn was closing in, 20 feet away. 15. Derek pulled out his pocket knife and cut his palm. Blood welled up, warm and red. He pressed his hand against the earth and began to speak the words from the journal, words in a language he didn't know but somehow understood. The entity screamed. Not a sound, a feeling, like the world itself was tearing apart. The corn stopped moving. The ground bucked beneath them. Derek kept speaking, kept bleeding into the soil, and he could feel it working, the binding breaking, the entity being pulled apart, dissolved, unmade. Claire grabbed Addison and started running. Derek's vision blurred. The words kept coming. His blood kept flowing. And then, just as he spoke the final phrase, the entity appeared in front of him. Smaller now, flickering, dying. "Wait," it said, and for the first time, it sounded afraid. "There's another way, a way you all survive." Derek hesitated, hand still pressed to the ground. "I can leave, I can break my own binding, but I need an anchor, something to carry with me, someone who invites me willingly." Derek's heart pounded. "What are you saying? One of you says yes, just once, and I take that permission with me when I go. You live, your family lives, and I'm free." The ground trembled. The ritual was almost complete. "But if you finish this," the entity whispered, "you die, and there's no guarantee they make it out." Derek looked toward where Claire and Addison had run. He couldn't see them anymore. He had seconds to choose. Derek stared at the entity, his bleeding hand still pressed against the earth. "Forget?" he said quietly. "That's your offer?" "All of it," the entity whispered, its form flickering like a dying light. "Ethan, this place, everything that happened here. I take the memories. You wake up on the highway with your family, safe, alive, free." Derek's chest tightened. To forget Ethan entirely, to lose even the pain of remembering him. "That's how you've survived," he said, understanding flooding through him. "People forget. They don't warn anyone. The cycle just continues." The entity said nothing. It didn't need to. Derek thought of Walter, of all those families, of every person who'd made a deal and walked away, memories erased, unable to stop the next victim. "No," he said. "Derek, no more deals. No more forgetting." He pressed his hand harder into the soil, blood soaking into the earth. "You end here." He spoke the final words. The binding shattered. The entity screamed, not with one voice but hundreds, everyone it had ever taken, ever held, ever consumed. The sound tore through the air like breaking glass, and Derek watched as it came apart, pulled into pieces, scattered into nothing. The cornfield ignited. Not slowly this time. The flames roared to life, spreading in every direction, consuming everything. Real fire. Unstoppable. Derek collapsed. His vision blurred. He couldn't feel his legs. Then Claire was there, grabbing him under the arms, dragging him. Addison took his other side, and together they ran. The flames chased them through the corn. Heat scorched Derek's back. Smoke filled his lungs. He could barely see, barely breathe, but Claire and Addison didn't let go. They burst out of the cornfield onto the dirt road and kept running. The road stretched ahead of them, straight and true. No loops, no tricks. Derek's legs gave out. He hit the gravel hard. "Dad!" Addison screamed. "Keep going," he whispered. But they didn't. They pulled him up, dragged him forward. Headlights appeared in the distance. Real headlights. A truck. The driver found them collapsed on the highway, Derek barely breathing, blood soaking through his shirt. The ambulance came, then the hospital, then days that blurred together in white walls and beeping machines. Derek survived. Barely. Weeks later, they drove back. The farm was gone, burned to ash. Nothing remained but blackened earth and the skeleton of the barn. A developer had already bought the land. Plans for a shopping center. Derek stood at the edge of the property and felt nothing. No pull, no voice, no presence. It was just land now. The final stop was the cemetery. Derek stood in front of Ethan's grave for the first time in 20 years, Claire and Addison beside him. "I'm sorry," he whispered to the headstone, "for everything, but you're free now. We all are." He still had nightmares, woke up sometimes hearing his name called from nowhere. But they faded a little more each night. They were free, scarred, but free. As they drove away, Derek looked back one last time at the burned farmland. In the distance, barely visible against the setting sun, one stalk of corn still stood in the ash. It swayed gently in the windless air. Then it was gone.